let's take a look at, okay, this is good.
I like the Beretta.
This is good. Tells you what about problems.
Action.
This is kind of good. It starts in the dark.
Yep.
And he
Focus on the feet and the leg.
kind of pans up.
Really good. And it's a tilt.
Okay, now, but what I'm expecting is, okay.
Bloodbath.
Okay, what I'm expecting, what are you expecting when he starts walking like that and you're starting to pan up? And what are you expecting?
A shootout.
No. What are you expecting? How are you expecting this pan to end? You're setting up an expectation there.
Well, some kind
It's
of
going to be a
reveal.
bad day.
Reveal on what?
Who he's going to see.
Well, yeah, eventually who's going to see, but what are you looking for the reveal, basically, when you're starting to pan up his body and he's walking towards you?
Or the gun.
The weapon.
His face.
Oh.
You want to see a much closer shot on his face, because his face is going to tell you exactly what's going on. And this is what happens with his face. Okay? I understand he's coming out of darkness, but it feels like by the time I see his face, it takes a second or two for it to register, and then he starts moving fast here. So I don't really get a good look at his face. But again, that's directing. I'm going to get off of that. Okay, this is what we're going to look at.
Busy restaurant, hardly the place for this.
Get like a real super close up.
Okay, let's just talk a little bit about dialogue here a second.
So you would have liked a tight shot when you...
Well, I would have liked something a little tighter. I just felt that you're setting me up that I'm going to see his face. And what I see is his face in darkness, and then when I can get to see his face, he moves too fast to get a good look to see what's going on there.
How about his, like, you focus right in his eye, like his intensity of his eyes? Like,
Yeah, I mean, going in for a real close-up of his eyes is to be overdoing it, I think. But, that's just me. That's just my feeling is that when you're using cinematic language, people are used to seeing something coming. Let's talk about dialogue. Dialogue is, basically good dialogue sounds like everyday speech, but it's not everyday speech. Okay? And it certainly doesn't sound like bad dialogue. And you can take a look at this. I'm just going to go through some of these things here. Everyday speech is boring, and it's repetitious. Everyday speech uses a lot of wasted words. Everyday speech basically wanders around a lot, uses boring cliches. Good dialogue doesn't have any wasted words, the fewest possible words, and you allow the actors to play with the scene. And I'm going to show you some stuff from scenes where they do that. And you'll see how much, I won't say more powerful, but how powerful it is. The subtle purpose in all that's said. Everything has to have a meaning. If it doesn't have a meaning, if it repeats something that's already been said, you cut it. Doesn't matter if it sounds natural. Sounding natural is not the key to good dialogue. Good dialogue sounds natural, but it's as brief as possible. And it's often clever. It's often more clever than we speak in real life, but it's not so clever that it's cute, that it stands out. It's just, very good. And it's unique to the individual. And I think most of that dialogue here is unique to the individuals. A lot of times you run across dialogue in scripts that you can interchange the characters and either one of them could say the dialogue. It's so, it's so bland or generic. But the other thing is learning how to make dialogue sound. The other thing about bad dialogue, and this isn't bad dialogue, is that bad dialogue sounds like writing. It sounds literary. It doesn't sound that way. And a lot of the things you do to make dialogue sound more real is you drop the first words, you use short sentences, you basically repeat words.
Contractions.
Contractions. One of the big things I want to mention to you is, and I have trouble with this, but this is a basic rule of good writing, and certainly in improv, is try to avoid using questions. Having one person ask another person, well, your story stops moving forward when you ask questions. Inevitably you get around to it sometimes, and avoid having characters try to teach other people something, okay? It's
mean verbally.
Verbally, yeah, I'm going to try to teach you something now. And it takes you out of the story. Those are basically rules of good writing. A lot of dialogue is non sequitur.
But going back to your question, but what if it's in a flashback and it's like a son or a father's teaching his son something, and they're flashing back, as the son.
Story stops. The only remember, the goal of film is emotion. That is your goal. Films are not designed primarily to communicate content. If you want to communicate content, write a book, preach a sermon. Films allow you to say 2 or 3 basic major things in the course of a scene. That's it. Everything else, the emotion is it's basically emotionally charged ideas. And you can get 2 or 3 of them in a scene and get it well. You try to do more than that, and it just falls on its face.
So, if like you're in a story that a grown man is flashing back to his childhood memory of his father teaching him something, how do you substitute that?
Well, basically, you don't emphasize you don't emphasize the teaching. You emphasize the relationship between the father and the son. In other words, the teaching is inconsequential. I mean, yeah, he's saying things that are important, but the key that's important is the relationship between the father and the son. Maybe that they had a great relationship, or maybe they had a bad relationship. That's what you're communicating. And first of all, I don't like flashbacks, but that's another whole subject, flashbacks.
A quick good example might be the teaching thing. He's not saying, okay, son, now you put a hole in the ground and then the seeds inside the hole. You can almost do it with no dialogue. You just show him.
Well, you could have him doing that, but the point is, this audience's attention is not going to be on what he's saying.
Right.
The audience's attention, and if the filmmaker's good, it's going to be on the father's hands. It's going to be on the son's face. It's going to be on the relationship. It's going to be the father putting his hand on the shoulder. And yes, he may be saying things, but the point is, if you're actually trying to teach the audience how to plant the seed, you lost it. That's not what the scene is about. The scene is about the emotion, and maybe at the end of the scene, the father says, "Remember, son, you know, what you plant is ultimately what you get." Boom! That's the only thing you can communicate in that whole scene. You get one shot, you get one bite at the apple in films. You can't, and filmmakers know that. I mean, the good films, it's all about. Basically, people come to see the emotional story. How do you learn and grow emotionally through something that's tearing you apart? And there's one lesson that you can get out of that. If you try to give people 15 different lessons, you're going to forget them.
But I'm thinking about